Everyone remembers losing their first tooth. You lose your tooth and you may be even a little bit scared to pull it out, but usually it just kind of falls out without any trouble. Put it under your pillow and your mom or dad is like, oh, maybe the tooth fairy will come. You wake up and then there's like $1 under your pillow, right? But where did the concept of the tooth fairy even come from? The tooth fairy has some pretty freaky origins when you really look into it, and there's even places around the world today that don't even believe in the tooth fairy and believe in other creatures that take your teeth. Welcome to my channel. My name is Melody. This channel is called Melody Ever After. I do lots of pop culture and creepy deep dives on topics that you probably have never heard about. And today we're talking about the freaky origins of the tooth fairy. In the Middle Ages, people weren't just like, aw, Timmy lost his first tooth. They were more like,
burn it so the witches don't find it.
From the 1200s to the 1600s Europe, people believed that the teeth, like fingernails or pieces of hair, had connections to your soul and held power. For some reason, they also believed that if witches found them, they could do rituals with your teeth and hair and fingernails, which I guess that makes sense because it's like an extension of your body. This made peasants of the Middle Ages extremely superstitious when it came to disposing of their baby teeth. You wouldn't just want a witch to find or run across one of your kid's teeth. So there were lots of weird ways to dispose of them. Some of these ways of disposal became ritualistic. They were ways like burying them under the floorboards, burning the teeth in the hearth, even feeding them to animals or making kids swallow them to break this magical kind of link. This is the first evidence that we have in human history of people hiding teeth under pillows and things like that. But the history of getting paid for your teeth actually even precedes the history of hiding them, which is kind of surprising to me. In Northern Europe, as early as the 900s to the 1200s, there was a tradition called, forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, tand fee or tand fri, kind of a little R on that, which tand fri sounds a little bit like fairy, like tooth fairy, and some people think that this is where we kind of got the fairy, but I'm getting ahead of myself because tand fee actually means tooth fee. This was really prominent in Norse culture and Norse mythology. When a child lost their first tooth, they received a small payment. It could have been a bribe from their parents or maybe even a gift from Odin himself. In some Norse households, children would place their baby teeth in bowls out in the open overnight, particularly in hopes that Odin, hoping for blessings, strength in battle, or just a good night's sleep, would grant them their wishes. So it was less of an exchange and more of a sacrifice, which is kind of cool. The whole idea of exchanging your teeth for money has been around for centuries, so the tooth fairy didn't invent it, she kind of just gentrified it, I guess. Now, as we begin to modernize, hold your breath, because the original tooth fairy had little bald hands, a fuzzy little body, whiskers, and some long teeth. In the 18th century France, the tooth fairy was actually known as a figure named Le Bon Petit Souris. Translation, the good little mouse. And in the story of the good little mouse, he was a magical mouse that helped a queen defeat an evil king by hiding under his pillow and then knocking all of his teeth out in his sleep. So, cool. Tooth vigilante rodent justice, if you will. Like Mouse Deadpool. This tale is one of the first ever recorded stories in history where a mythical being steals teeth, hides under pillows, and serves up dental revenge. The first original variation of the tooth fairy was a mouse, and this story of Le Bon Petit Souris how is my French? Le Bon Petit Souris? I don't know how to speak French. I feel like I'm just making a fool of myself. Is that the case? This story of the tooth fairy being a little mouse spread all over Europe and across Latin America. And in Latin America, Le Bon Petit Souris actually evolved into a little creature named Raton Perez. Raton Perez was a little tiny Spanish-speaking mouse who still serves as the tooth fairy in places like Spain, Mexico, Chile, and Argentina for many of those children, which it's cute and all, but the thought of an actual rat stealing my teeth really freaks me out. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the original connotation of Le Bon Petit Souris, like actually like knocking someone's teeth out in their sleep and stealing their teeth and running away, or if it's like the theory of just a little rat burrowing under my pillow, that really freaks me out. So we had this concept of this we had this concept of this cute little mouse over time that takes people's teeth. So you wonder, why is the tooth fairy not a mouse today in Western countries like America, the UK, and primarily English-speaking countries? That's because early American colonial settlers and people in the UK actually had the witch trial scare around the 1800s, so they kind of reverted back from the Middle Ages to being scared of witches again, which is kind of where in America you get the Salem witch trials. And this non-sensory perpetual fear that witches were going to steal your babies kind of created a regression of the tooth fairy, and people continued to believe that witches were going to take your kids' teeth. And because of that, they reverted back to the original ways of disposing teeth, especially in America. They buried teeth in flower pots for good luck. They even had their kids swallow their teeth so the new tooth grew in better, or they hid them in the walls of their homes to ward off evil spirits. Basically, classic satanic panic is the reason that we in English-speaking countries don't have a cute little mouse tooth fairy and instead have a tooth fairy, because these people still believed again the witches thing. I know that people who practice witchcraft use human body parts, like first of all I'm thinking like Santeria, and then also other pagan rituals that are non-traditional use things like teeth, locks of hair, fingernails for hexes and things like that, but like that couldn't have been happening every freaking day, especially not in a Eurocentric Christian Western country like England or America. Like that could have not been the norm. There weren't just women sneaking around looking for teeth. What? They had things to worry about, right? Like cholera. Am I crazy for this? I just think that those fears were probably extremely irrational, but what about the witch trials weren't irrational, actually? And that's how we got to know about the origins of the tooth fairy. Except the fact that, like, where did the fairy come from? The idea of the tooth fairy didn't exist until a female playwright named Esther Watkins Arnold wrote a play called The Tooth Fairy in Chicago. That's right, we've had centuries of offering your teeth to gods, and rats stealing your teeth, and witches stealing your teeth, and what reigns prevalent in today's society is based on a play that was written in 1927, literally last century, about 100 years ago. That is the only thing framing our modern depiction of the tooth fairy, which I find despicable. Throughout 1949 to the early 1950s, the Chicago Tribune ran articles referencing the tooth fairy as a play, and then parenting magazines started pushing that myth pretty hard. Come on, mommy magazines? We had witches. We had witches, dude. By the late 1950s, the little pastel sparkly woman with wings who sneaks in through your window was coming into American homes all across the country. And because of America's incredible push for capitalism and incredible ability to influence media, this kind of concept of the tooth fairy was pushed in not only magazines, but also as movies, music, stories, TV shows, etc. So, in short, a little bit of faith, trust, pixie dust, and capitalism, and boom, now the entire world pretty much believes in the tooth fairy, except for those select countries who still believe in Le Bon Patisserie and Raton Perez. So, it's kind of disappointing to me, because we started out with some pretty cool folklore of witches stealing teeth and rats stealing teeth and evil kings. This isn't to say that Esther Watkins' play The Tooth Fairy was bad. I haven't seen it. I'm sure she was a very talented writer and it's a very good play. But something that's so rich in folklore getting kind of trampled on by a more modern myth, kind of just disappointing to me. But then again, if there's no modern myths, there will be no more mythology in the future, so can't complain. So there you have it, the weird and even a little bit spooky mythology of the Tooth Fairy. This channel's called Melody Ever After. My name is Melody. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you showed some love, maybe even checked out the rest of my videos for lots of other fun, weird, obscure stuff. If you've made it till this long, what's stopping me from seeing you in the next one? Until next time!